Hey, so I want to talk about that dukkha that's been bothering you. The dukkha. Yeah, so anyway, I was trying to do a video yesterday, but I guess it was late. The internet here dies when it's late, so it was not the best video. So there you go. Because it was buffering. It was buffering. Anyway, what I was trying to talk about yesterday was a couple of things. I'm not a I'm not a Buddhist per se, but I like to sort of read pretty widely and a bunch of stuff and listen to different perspectives on meditation and whatnot. And so I've been listening a lot. As I mentioned last night, I'm going to repeat myself a little bit here, but as I mentioned last night, I've been watching this channel quite a lot called the Hillside Hermitage. So the Hillside Hermitage is a channel on YouTube. I really recommend it. It's basically a Buddhist, a group of Buddhist monks, but the main monk, the teacher, is really good. He kind of works. I want to say it's like a Socratic method, but I'm just like making words up there. But he challenges the monks. He challenges them to compare their experiences with the words of the Buddha, which is pretty interesting. It's interesting because it's like rigorous, right? And I'm just checking my connection here to make sure that I've got I'm not buffering. Okay, so it's a pretty rigorous. I can't watch myself talking about this. Hold on a second. Can I just get rid of that? Let me just turn that off. Okay. So it's a pretty rigorous teaching. There's lots of videos, and what's interesting about it is you often find web pages with the precepts of the Buddha, or you find people talking generally about what things might mean. But in the Hillside Hermitage, it's really granular. It's really into the details of thought and the structures of consciousness, which is kind of where I'm at. But for me, it's different than where I'm at in a way, because where I tend to meditate is I tend to meditate, for lack of a better word, and not always, but I have a tendency to meditate on something approaching the astral plane, I guess. So, and because I'm in that zone, I'm perceiving consciousness from a different perspective. Some people call the imagination the water element. So you might call it, I'm meditating from the perspective of water. Whereas these monks are very much meditating from the earth element. So they're dealing with standard meditational topics and ideas. Hey, Joy, thanks. So they're meditating on standard ideas like emotions, moods, thoughts, obviously, and how to deal with those things. Now, I don't really study formally with anybody. I've been working with a Tantra guy for a little while now, and I kind of feel drawn to Tantra in a lot of ways. Now, obviously, there's a Buddhist Tantra, and there's some overlap with some of the concepts, and then also there are some concepts depending on the style of Tantra. There's some things which are distinct. Hey, Matthias. But there are some similar concepts, and oftentimes by listening to something like a Buddhist thing, it will give you a different perspective on the structures of consciousness which you're dealing with, and it allows you to sort of triangulate in to understand more, especially when we're approaching non-duality and we're trying to deal with the structures of consciousness, which generally are like identification, which are not allowing us to perceive the non-dual state. So one of the ones I was listening to from the Hermitage was they get so many great chats. It's unbelievable. And there's some things I don't agree with, but I'm familiar. What's funny about it is I'm familiar with all the territory they're talking about just from my own meditations. But but they were talking about this concept called dukkha, and dukkha, amazingly, is actually I think it's like the first noble truth, right? You've heard about the noble truths of Buddhism. Dukkha is the first one, apparently. So I'm just going to do the definition. The first noble truth, dukkha, is it says, now, monks, is the noble truth of dukkha. Dukkha is birth is dukkha, aging is dukkha, death is dukkha, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, despair are dukkha. Association with the unbeloved is dukkha. Separation from the loved is dukkha. Not getting what is wanted is dukkha. In short, the 5 aggregates are dukkha. So what we're getting here is dukkha is a concept they're using for various feelings or moods of consciousness, or I call them like modalities of consciousness, right? And it did mention that the dukkha is also the 5 clinging aggregates. What are those? So that's the hindrances. Hold on a second. The aggregates are. I had this like set up here so I could just read this, and now they're gone. This is interesting. So the 5, yeah. So I often talk about the 36 Tattvas, right? The 36 Tattvas is a Tantric concept, which is explained in a bunch of places, notably in the Recognition Sutras by Christopher Wallace, where he talks about the Tattvas, and he's got a map of the Tattvas. And I've meditated through the Tattvas, and it brings you out. It brings you out of the state of duality, basically. So what's interesting is these aggregates are parallel. They're kind of the same. The aggregates, the 5 aggregates, are similar to some of the Tattvas, right? So probably these represent 10 or 15 of the Tattvas, right? So what that is the 5 physical sense organs, right? And the corresponding objects of the sense organs. So the eyes, the ears, the sound, the eyes, the ear, the mouth, the tongue, and skin, this kind of stuff, right? So you get the taste, touch, and everything. But then you've also got, you've got the organs, then you've also got the sort of verb, like taste, touch. Then you've actually got this, in the 36 Tattvas, it's like a metaphysical object, which is actually where meaning is created, right? It's actually where it's right. Anyway, so it's basically the sense doors, right? The sense doors. Now in Buddhism, these monks are often talking very strictly about the Buddha's words, and their whole idea is to close the sense doors, right? So the whole idea is close the sense doors, or they're pretty strict about closing them. And I think one of the distinctions here is that Buddhists are like trying, or this branch of Buddhism, which I think is Theravada. I'm not like an expert in all this stuff, but they're trying to like discipline the mind. So what happens is the sense doors are kind of like one of the blocks between you and non-duality, if you will, because they're the entrance points of information, right? Now the way they deal with it here is these guys, they're kind of like saying, turn them off. And if you discipline the mind, what will happen is all the things which are coming to you. So for example, the things which are coming to you are the 5 hindrances. And so what are the 5 hindrances? That's sensory desire, ill will, sloth and torpor, doubt and restlessness and remorse, right? So there's a lot of this stuff. For example, sensory desire, you can see how that would come through the sense doors. And a lot of these things are coming through the senses. So these Buddhist guys are like really disciplining the mind to like not allow it. Now, a lot of Tantra people, especially, I'm on a Tantra group, a neo-Tantra group on Facebook, which is called Tantra Retreats. It's where people can promote the retreats. And it's all about getting naked and, getting sexual, right? All of it, which is a valid form of coming to terms with the tantric concepts, but it's probably in a lot of ways just being sexual, right? And I caution you, today I typed the word tantra into Twitter. Yeah, careful with that one. Yeah, if you've got if you don't have if you're not blocking content, that was a surprise. Apparently a lot of gay men are into tantra. Yeah, that's what happened. It was just like all these just hardcore, like, dude. So, which is great if they're enjoying tantra, God bless them, but it was a bit surprising. Anyway, so what happens, it seems to me that one of the differences here is like in these Buddhist monks are really working on disciplining the mind. And what the head monk, and the head monk's he's really a good teacher, a very good teacher. But his basic thing is like, you just what you do is you observe the things coming in, you recognize them for what they are, right? And eventually the mind becomes disciplined and the thoughts no longer come to you. So if you have recurrent thoughts, right? If you have addictions or whatever, so yeah, so that's something that happens to me. I often have recurrent thoughts which come in, and it can be annoying. I remember when I was living in Miami, I would get up, I'd start driving to work, and I'd always stop and I'd buy 2 large coffees, and it wasn't even making me happy. It wasn't even a joyful activity. It was just, it's like I couldn't stop. And I was like, dude, and it was like, I don't even think, and it was like this mechanical thing you were doing. So one of the interesting things that came from watching these monks is that they were, as they're discussing this. Now, one of the things I talk about is when I'm meditating, I'm in this sort of astral state. And so I'm analyzing consciousness off. I mean, I do a bunch of different stuff, but sometimes like elementally. And so I often talk about this, is you can actually see the mechanics of consciousness. Like you can actually see this stuff. It's engineered. The consciousness is engineered. So I was talking about this yesterday. I'm going to repeat myself. I apologize, but I thought it was useful. So if this plane represents the plane of what does this represent? This is the I'm totally lost here. I remember what I'm going to do. I know exactly what I'm going to do. But yeah. So if this plane represents reality, or like the pure self, what happens is consciousness is here. Now, if consciousness is perpendicular to reality, essentially. And so if consciousness is like this, you might notice it, right? Because it's got a perpendicular connection. But the way it works is it's got a tangential relationship to reality. So rather than being like perpendicular, it's got a sort of gradient. It's got a sort of gradient curve on it. So like what happens is if you're down like here, you can't see any difference because it looks exactly the same. And the engineering is such that it's completely perfectly dovetailed into physical reality. So you cannot see it unless you're a crazy person, right? But like, so you get this gradient, but when you move in like to like the meditative state, you can see this, and you can see this, it can only be described as engineering. Like it's not something that happened by accident, and it's not something men can create, right? So it's got a specific engineered structure, which is dynamic, right? It's got a dynamic frictionless. Well, you can't really say it's frictionless. It's frictionless from the perspective of humans, but there's clearly friction in it because we often refer to some of these dynamic behaviors as earth, water, fire, and air, which are clearly represent, I call them the viscosities, right? So there is friction. If there's viscosity, there's friction, but it's not friction the way we commonly think of friction. It's a sort of divine or astral friction in the design of consciousness. So this is something which is possible. See, I don't hear people talking about this stuff because I think most people who are meditating, like these monks who are very, very advanced monks, right? They're very attained. They're working on these. They're working on consciousness from the sort of obvious place, like from thoughts and feelings, which I tend not to do. I do it sometimes, but it's really interesting listening to them, because what was interesting about it is they start identifying these standard structures, thoughts, feelings, and moods as mechanical systems also. So this is really interesting. So when you start making this connection, that moods and emotions are mechanics of consciousness, this can be a useful pivot to start recognizing the 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 real self, if you will, because if it's mechanical, then you shouldn't be identifying with it, right? The problem is we identify with these structures. So how often do you get a mood that comes into you, like, oh, I'm an angry person, I'm a hungry person, I'm a caffeine addict, oh, I'm a drinker, right? Um, Whatever it might be, I'm a tantra person, right? All these identities or all these moods are identified with, right? And man, I got to tell you, it's a really interesting, process to watch those things come in and identify them as mechanical. And the thing is, it's what's interesting about this for me anyway is like, I do this all the time in meditation. I mean, that's basically a lot of my practices. And Matthias here is saying that those things can also be emotions and moods can be blockages too. And in some ways that's true. I mean, look at me with that coffee in Miami. I was like, I couldn't stop. I mean, what is going on, right? So there's some kind of weird thing going on there. So it's a blockage or whatever you might want to call it. There's something going on there. But what's interesting about it is when you start observing what we typically identify as our personality as mechanical structures of consciousness, then it's very easy to disidentify with them. And this is something, like I was saying, I do this all the time in meditation, but one of the things which is becoming more obvious to me is because, like, I don't know why, but I'm really good at meditation. Like, I'm really good, whatever. I mean, it's like something just happened. Like I have perfect concentration, right? And concentration allows you to laser through dimensions. But it's kind of restricted to meditation. Like I go with meditation and I do not live a pristine life, It's a life really, really saturated with a lot of dukkha, right? With a lot of dissatisfaction and thought forms, which are like, what is that? And like these controlling things, like, oh, like just before I started this video, I was finishing a coffee. And I went, oh, I better get another coffee. And I went through the kitchen and I was making coffee, and I'm like, this is fucking dukkha. What? You don't need this, dude. This is not serving a role. And it's like, it's really funny. So this is one of the cool things about looking at different perspectives and listening to different teachers. Even when you're know-all or you think you know all, you can gain stuff from other teachers in a big way, And so those monks have a really great disciplined, it's interesting, the disciplined way of teaching. And it's very conversational. Like the videos can seem a little boring at first, but if you give them a chance, they really develop into interesting discussions about the role. And you don't often get this. If you listen to like somebody like Eckhart Tolle or Alan Watts, it's all very vague bullshit. It's, I mean, they get great voices, but this is serious analysis of the dynamics of meditation. Yeah, Matthias here saying enlightenment is the path of destruction. That's definitely what it is, right? It's definitely the path of destruction. And but that's good, because what it's destroying is it's destroying illusion, right? And what's interesting about it is the illusions that we're so caught up in are the hindrances and the aggregates. I mean, we're completely caught up in this. So the destruction is removing our attachment to these illusions. Right. So the enlightenment is the path of destruction. That's one way. That's like a glass half empty way of looking at it. Right. Like it's destroying everything. No. It's actually freeing you from the fetters of delusion, right? And it's really powerful. So I mean, so this happened to me. I was down at the supermarket, and you go to various parts of the supermarket, and you're like, oh, and you're like, dude, what is going on? And there's like an energy. It's like some of these energies are patterned behaviorally. Some of them are linked in with like biologically with dopamine. Some of them will be karmic. Some of them will be addictions or whatever entities. Certainly. But one of the things that's interesting about this is like, because it's easy to get caught up with entities and like mystical descriptions of this stuff and scientific descriptions about the dopamine. That's what everybody's talking about, on YouTube, right? But one of the things those monks are basically saying is, listen, if you just recognize the thought when it comes in, if you just recognize it for what it is, it might still have power over you, but like once you start continually recognizing it, right? So say you're trying to quit drinking and you go to the supermarket and there's a 6-pack of beer and you're grabbing the 6-pack of beer and then you're like, dude, this is Dukkha. This is Dukkha, right? I mean, that's fine. Maybe you'll still grab it and you'll have some beers. Doesn't mean you failed. It's just a process. It's a recognition. It's a recognition of reality. So you just keep touching the truth. This is what it is. This is one of these energy structures. And so the more you touch in these structures, the more vivid it becomes. I think this is really important because it's like because I think a lot of people live really unsatisfactory lives, right? We tend to live unsatisfactory lives. I know I have, and a lot of times life is good, but there's little sections of it which are unsatisfactory. There's little sort of areas which are like like you just like they're noisy or they're dense. Some people, it's interesting actually. Monks talk quite a lot about anger, right? And I don't think of myself as an angry person, but after listening to them in meditation one day, I noticed, oh wait, there's anger coming out here, and I started noticing it. Like, oh, I guess there are anger structures, right? And but there's a lot of this sort of dense material in our psychology, right? In our psychology, can you come up with a more identified statement than that? My psychology, whatever, right? It's not your psychology. It's conscious structures which you're identifying with, right? Let me just read here. Hold on a second. Sure. Well, I mean, that's one of the things. I mean, Matthias here is saying that you can also get attachment to not doing things, and that's one of the hindrances here is sloth and torpor, not doing things, right? So restlessness and remorse. There's a whole bunch. Doubt. There's a whole bunch of different ways this can manifest. What's interesting about it is and it's actually interesting. What I like about this is moving awareness of consciousness out of the meditative state, right? So I'll do like 2 hours of meditation in the morning, right? Sometimes one, but you do a bit of meditation, and dude, it can be hardcore. Like, a week ago, like there was an evocation of the Virgin Mary in the room. It was crazy. But then you get up and you go and make a pot of coffee, and you're like, okay, and you go straight back into it, right? You go back into all the lessons from the meditative state aren't transferring over. So I think this is what's cool about these monks is because what's interesting about the monks is they're really working on actualizing these principles in waking consciousness, right? Now I'm doing it in sort of semi-astral meditative consciousness, but actually doing it in daily life is clearly really powerful. And it's also really difficult because Oh, no, because if you're meditating, I'm not identifying as Scott as I'm meditating. I mean, I'm like out of the body most of the time, So, but you get up and then all of a sudden you're just moving right back into like your regular identificatory modality of awareness, right? And you're just doing the same stuff. So it's interesting. So like if you allow yourself, I mean, just to look at some of these concepts. So like sensory desire, dude. Yeah, all the time, right? Doubt, all the time. Ill will, occasionally. Sloth and torpor, a good amount. Restlessness and remorse, a little bit of that maybe. But everybody's going to have their own little sandwich of those materials, Probably there's astrological reasons for some of this stuff, right? A lot of the stuff. If you've ever worked with a good astrologer, I mean, they map you out really effectively, right? I mean, it's a really effective mapping. But to actually pull this into real life and start watching it, so it's really interesting. So a lot of times what I'll do in the morning is I'll get up, I'll make a pot of coffee, and I've got a whole bunch of like vlogs I listen to, and like I don't have a lot of work right now, so like I got up at 5 a.m. this morning, and I think I sat here until like 9 drinking coffee, catching up on news stories and watching reviews of products and stuff like this. And very, very enjoyable time, But it probably falls into the slothful. And so I started thinking about it, and it's like it's like how do you, like, a lot of people say this, like somebody was talking to me the other day about Tony Robbins and saying, dude, do you think Tony Robbins is full of shit? I'm like, I kind of think he's full of shit. I think even if he does know any of this information, he's certainly not teaching any of it, right? And even if he is an expert in NLP, he doesn't appear to be using it that much in any of his work, unless he's so sophisticated that I'm not noticing it. But I think basically he's just like a cheerleader more than anything, But one of the things that is quite interesting about that guy is that there's this attitude of seizing the day and like being active and right? Which is like a standard sort of like commonplace way of moving ahead in life, right? But even though it's not sophisticated in terms of its translation to the Buddha's words, which I'm sure he doesn't give a fuck about, what is interesting about it is bypassing some of these hindrances, right? So it's not relying on torpor. It's identifying restlessness and remorse, and then trying to be active about it and doing something about it. So even though the technique's not like a Buddhist technique, it's trying to be active about doing something. So I get up and started doing stuff today. I'm like, because I started recognizing this pattern, like, how do you pull these precepts into normal life? So, well, I mean, one way, and what's interesting about this is well, I don't know about you, but have you ever listened to somebody like Tony Robbins, like on YouTube, right? You listen to them and you're like, yeah, you're like, fuck yeah, man, right? You're like, I totally agree with that. And then he's like, okay, now let's all get up and do something. You're like, well, I'm not gonna do that, right? I'm not gonna actually get up. No, I'm just gonna watch it. I'm just gonna watch this. I'm gonna understand, right? I'm gonna understand this. Will be fine, right? And so there's this. So what's interesting about this is it can often be tricky to move into a state of worthful of good action. Moving into a state of good action can be challenging, especially if you're in a physical state of sloth. I was talking to my brother a couple of weeks ago, and I work with like kettlebells, right? So I got the kettlebells and I do that stuff in the morning. And I was talking to my brother, and he was like, yeah, he's like, I can do the kettlebells. He's like, but he's like, I just don't want to get down on the floor. He's like, I don't want to get down on the floor. And he's like, I just can't deal with it, right? and it's an energy problem. And dude, I've been there too, you know, like I was watching some videos today doing the kettlebells. It was like a guided thing, and they get down and they start doing really slow push-ups. And I'm like, oh man, this is, I don't want to get down on the floor. So there's like this energy, there's an energetic challenge. So what I'm trying to say is there are subtle blocks into changing behavior. It's almost like the predominant dukkha, which you are participating in, is almost got momentum, right? It's got like a momentum to it. And sort of changing the directionality of it feels slightly uncomfortable, right? And what's funny about that is that discomfort, we identify with that too, right? So we're identifying with it rather than identifying this discomfort is just a byproduct of a consciousness change. We say, no, it's me, right? It's me. And so it's like the double whammy. So what has to happen is we have to practice identifying these energy structures or these energy momentums, energy blocks, if you want to call them, and allow ourselves to see them for what they are. Now, what was interesting is like there's been a whole bunch of stuff today I did want to do, and then there was some stuff I didn't want to do today. And each time the stuff I did want to do wasn't good for me, right? And then the stuff I didn't want to do was good for me. It was good for the house. And man, I didn't want to do it. But what I was trying to do, I was trying to zone in on the conscious structure. And what's interesting about this is when you zone in on the actual conscious structure of what's going on, the transition into activity or to stop the activity is actually much easier because all of a sudden you're no longer what the Buddhist monks at the Hillside Hermitage call this. They call this achieving context, right? So you have to or you perceive context, right? So you have to see the actual context of what's happening, and that allows you to disidentify it. And what happens is once you see it from this sort of zoomed out meta state, and you're no longer identifying with it, it's like it becomes really easy. It's actually pleasant to do the change because you kind of feel like, hey, I'm actually pretty cool here because I can actually see what's going on now, right? Now I see this in meditation all the time, but it's like applying it to the real world. And you know, the funny thing is that I get up at 5 a.m. The real world is a long part of the day, right? You're not going to be enlightened if you meditate for 2 hours, and for the other 8 hours you're sleeping, and then for the other how many hours are left? 14 hours you're not doing this, right? It's a missed opportunity, right? Even if you're failing, it doesn't matter. It's just like you keep touching it. This is one of the things that Muji talks about in a different context. So in the context, for example, of perceiving the true self, right? And one of the ways you can do this is like you perceive a thought, and then you ask yourself, well, who's thinking about this thought, right? And then you move into this space, and then once you get into that space and you're comfortable, then you move into another state, right? Matthias is asking me if I've moved into Parabrahman. I don't know what that means. I've moved into some really advanced states. I'm not trying to be difficult. I just haven't looked the word up. So I know that that's a word which some people use, like, but I'm just not up on the lingo, I guess. But yeah, I don't know. I've achieved, right? I've moved into some pretty sophisticated states, and not even sophisticated. Like I've moved into pure non-duality. I do that pretty regularly. I move into other states which are very, yeah. I don't know. I don't hear people talking about some of the other states I move into, but who knows? I don't know. Let me have a look up. What the fuck is Parabrahman? Let's have a look. Parabrahman. Okay. Let's see. Okay. In Advaita Vedanta, Parabrahman is conceptualized. Let me just find the simple version of this. This is like a huge thing. Okay. Para-Brahman is Brahman without form or qualities. It's a state of complete knowledge of self as being. So yes, I've moved into that state. Yeah, I'm not in that state all the time, but I had some big experiences moving into that with the with Krister doing the rasa, and I've also had like hardcore stuff with that in meditation, right? Like really powerful, what you would call para-Brahman states. Uh, Here's another question. Do you think by pursuing desire, you cannot reach higher states? What's your end goal by denying things like coffee? Oh, no, like Frankie, no, I don't. What's interesting about this is the Buddhist monks on Hillside Hermitage, who are really great to listen to, they think you can't achieve, no, they're not saying you can't achieve higher states. They say you can achieve higher states, but you will not become enlightened. However, the way I see it is there's a couple of ways of doing this. Is like you can watch the sense doors, right? And you can identify these hindrances and aggregates coming in and recognize them. That's cool. And in some ways, that's what I typically do, like in meditation. But usually, like what I call tantric is I actually allow the stuff to come in. So I will allow the contents of consciousness to come in, because what we're talking about here is identifying the contents of consciousness and the structure of consciousness. So if you're entertaining desire, you're dealing with the contents of consciousness, right? So you're ignoring the larger context, right? It's the larger context which is more interesting. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't engage with desire, but the way I do it, and I do this a lot in meditation, is rather than closing the sense doors, what I do is sometimes I close them, but a lot of times what I'll do is I will allow the contents to come in. And the way I allow the contents to come in is it comes in almost like a barium. It's when you're getting like they're doing a colonoscopy, you have to drink barium so they can look into you. That's how I think about the contents. So I allow them to come in, and that sort of puts a backlight onto the conscious structure, right? Plus, the other aspect of this is that sometimes I get mixed feelings in this. Like the monks are saying, if you just block it, eventually the thought stream will change. The tantric way is to sort of transform the contents, and that also is a way of purification. So, for example, say that you've got like a recurring fantasy about a Thailand masseuse. I've mentioned this a couple of times in the last 24 hours, but that's not actually my thing, but it's a funny image. Anyway, say you've got a thing for Thailand masseuses, right? And you're thinking about this constantly. Now, a lot of times what happens is when people think about things like that, they're actually thinking about it with an intense sense of like hot desire, or they might be thinking about it with a sense of shame, like, oh, I really should be thinking about my wife, but I want that freaking masseuse, right? And so what happens is they're extremely engaged at the level of contents, and not only that, but they're birthing extra contents there in lust and shame, right? And those also can be valuable backlights, but they tend not to be. What tends to happen is it tends to become a spiral going deeper into the contents. Yeah, right, because you're not just thinking about the masseuse. All of a sudden you're thinking about the curvature of her hips, and then wait, there's another curvature, and then there's that, and there's and what happens, you get like a collage of sensory impressions which form like a holographic reality, which can be quite interesting, right? By contrast, you could look at the image of the masseuse, and then you could start like identifying it as something else, right? So I was saying to Matthias yesterday or today, I don't know when it was, but like, for example, like I was working with a girl who was really interested in learning about this sexual energy, the movement of sexual energy. Now, a lot of people do Tantra. The way you do this is you take your clothes off, the girl gets on top of you, you get excited, and then what you do is you just sort of feel the energy moving between you, you know, and you focus on the energy, and right, and you try. They'll be having sex, but they'll be trying to like really slow things down and focus on the energy structures. Now, the way I do it is I actually think that's very basic. I think it's better to work from the context of the imagination. So I know I was working with this girl, and she was interested in how you do this. So we started off, and she was quite a sexual girl, right? And this is online, right? And so we're just doing like a guided meditation. So I'm just discussing things. We're doing a video chat, and we're discussing stuff. And I'm like, okay, we're going to move energy like around like your heart chakra, right? And then we're going to move energy down from the heart chakra down to the belly button. Then we'll go down. And so what happens is you want to engage sexual ideas. Why? Because sexual ideas provokes absolute magnetic concentration, right? So if I start telling the girl, I'm going down to your vagina, that's really pushy. And it's like, it grabs the attention, right? It grabs the attention. And what they think is going to happen is they think that things are going to become sexual because that's where they're at. They think because they're viewing things from the context of contents, right? They think that's where it's going. Now you've got their attention completely, right? And then what you do is you're just moving energy around let's call it the yoni, since we're in the sort of yoga context here, and then you move the energy up towards the cervix, right? Now the cervix is really interesting, but it's way less sexual, right? And then you move the energy up into the womb, right? And the womb is a lot of things, but there's not a lot of people getting off on the womb. And so all of a sudden, what you've actually done metaphorically is you've changed the quality of the energy, right? So what you started off with is you start off with a magnetic sexual idea, which is problematic in some ways, right? And then what you do is you transform it into a different kind of energy. And then the womb energy is extremely different, right? We're doing this together. I mean, we're chatting. So I'm guiding and pushing energy, right? So it's like a transmission, right? Then when you get into the womb, like there might be an evocation. So that's where like a lot of women will have sexual trauma, right? And so what they think is going to happen, they're going to have some like hot sexual experience, right? And then yeah, dude, I'm with you, President-elect. Totally get that, right? But what you do is in that case, I evoked the Virgin Mary, right? And that's just something I've been doing recently, the Virgin Mary thing. But what's interesting with the Virgin Mary is the Virgin Mary in particular is extremely valuable it's funny, she's not a polar opposite, dude. She's not. What's funny, if you look up the Virgin Mary imagery online, you often see the Virgin Mary with large flowing cloaks. And there's a lot of imagery where they're showing that the cloaks represent the vagina. And the Virgin Mary, what's famous about the Virgin Mary is she was a virgin birth. Her womb was really important. And the purity was really important. She represents the purification of the womb, right? And she represents the emanation of motherly love, right? I mean, it's a really powerful image, right? And so what's cool about this is the girl is she's in a completely focused state. So when I do the evocation, even if they don't actually feel the evocation as such, but they still get the idea, like, oh, like even if you're just perceiving it on the mundane level, the level is that something special just happened here, right? Because and the thing is, it's not me, right? It's not me. I'm just guiding the energy. Because what happens is like when you start doing this stuff, I feel a little weird doing it. I don't want to be a cult leader, right? But like, but the energy starts flowing. I just follow where the energy goes, right? So when it starts off, it's kind of me like just trying to like get rid of my personality. It's like, okay. And then the energy starts going. It's like, okay. And so I just follow the energy. So it's not like I'm saying, okay, I mean, I say this, but it's not like I'm pushing the energy. Like, no, we're going here. No, I'm watching where the energy is going, and I follow the energy, and I sort of transcribe what's happening. Well, the reason I'm doing Mama Mary Miguel is because, like, I was working with this Tantra guy, Tomer, who I did an interview with here, and Tomer's he teaches Tantra. He's really good, and I've been doing, I think, for the last 9 months, I've been doing like a bunch of mantras from he's in Sri Vidya Tantra group. So I've been doing a lot of the Sri Vidya mantras and like sadhanas. And so the last sadhana was for Durga, right? So there was a big celebration of Durga for about 10 days. And so I don't really know much about Durga, but I was doing the mantra for Durga. And so every time you do these things, it's kind of an exploration, like what is this energy? Because I don't know what it is. And like, I look at like some books and stuff and get an idea of what's going on. And then what I do is I just get into the sort of flow of what the mantra is and what the energy is. And it's funny, I swear to God, every single one of these mantras that I got, and you can, if you want to do this stuff, they've got a Facebook group. It's called Shivoham. I'll put it in here in the chat. It's called Shivoham Tantra. It's on Facebook, Shivoham. And so they've got a guru, and like Tomer is one of the, he's been there for 8 years, so he's one of the teachers now. So they do mantras all the time. Now, what I found about this is you might find mantras online. So you'll be doing like Om Namah Shivaya. And there's a whole bunch of, I've probably for 8 or 9 years, I've been doing Om Mani Padme Hum, right? Which is the Tibetan mantra for Avalokiteshvara, right? Got it tattooed on my arm. And the reason I got it tattooed on my arm is because I started feeling that something was happening. Dude, Om Mani Padme Hum. I'm not sure if it's probably not just that mantra, but like something happened with that. And what happens is when you, and the monks talk about this, they don't talk about mantras, but what happens is when you allow your mind to start pondering beautiful, high quality concepts, it changes who you are. It changes you. It changes the quality and purity of the structures of your consciousness. Now, who we think we are is we think we're just some kind of like, some kind of like personality, right? I was just listening to Lex Friedman with some AI guy, and dude, their perception of consciousness is so pathetic, and they're in charge of AI. It's astonishing. See, AI should be called AE. It's the artificial ego, because consciousness has 4 aspects, right? It's got 5 aspects. It's got water, air, fire, earth, and spirit. And those actually work as a sort of balance of powers, as well as a transformational thing. And that's not what they're doing with AI. AI is just a linear stream of intelligence. So all they're really representing is the air element. And anytime you invoke a single element, without balance and without transformation, you're opening Pandora's box. And that's what they're about to do. Anyway, I lost where I am at. What am I trying to say here? So you need to, well, let me just bump over here. Matthias is saying, do you think you can help raise Kundalini energy? Probably. I mean, I did some transmissions. I actually, maybe about a year ago or 2 years ago, I was meditating and dropped into what you would call Parabrahman, I guess, and Shiva showed up, and it was this huge experience. And I was told, as the experience was coming to an end, I have to start doing transmissions. So I started doing transmissions, but I'm not real comfortable. But I'm trying to do stuff like that. So part of it is to Shivoham Tantra is part of Sri Vidya. Sri Vidya is one of the biggest branches of Tantra in India, right? So Shivoham's it's like a temple in some part of India, and Tomer is a guy who I spoke to. I interviewed him here because he did like a tutorial series on Udemy about astral projection, and I did his series and I had success astral, like doing classic astral projection, So I decided to interview him, and then as we were talking after the interview, he mentioned he was actually a Tantra teacher, and I was like, dude, why didn't you tell me? And what's funny is I've done a bunch of my own courses, like on my website, like years ago, and I mentioned Sri Vidya a lot, and I've actually investigated a lot of the practices. So one of the things which is interesting is in Sri Vidya, there's a practice called Nyasa, and Nyasa, what you do is you like touch different parts of the body, and as you touch the body, there will be like a mantra. So what you do is you evoke a spirit into that part of your body. I'm just going to look this up pretty quickly. Shri chakra. So there's actually, hey, tell me if you can hear this. I'm about to play an audio. Actually, well, I'll put it on here. I'll put it on my telephone. Hold on a second. Sri. It's called the Stotram. Yeah, you son of fucking likes Friedman, man. Nice guy. Let's see. It's called Stotram Sri Chakra. Hopefully this is it. Okay. So wait a minute. There's got to be a better one than this. So this is the Stotram. This sounds like it might be too. I just want a simple one here. Hold on a second. God, this is one I want. This is one I want. Okay. This is a Sri Vidya meditation. You probably can't see that. Can you see this? It's going to come on here. That's the Sri chakra they've got there. So they're about to start singing here any second. Now, as they're doing this, there's little dots moving around the chakra. And so what happens is each spot on the chakra corresponds with a part of your body. So the way it works is the outer part here is kind of like the root chakra, and as it moves in, that's actually moving up in the body. And so these actually represent specific locations, right? And so what they do is, as you're doing this, you actually touch each part of your body and you invoke the divinity into each part of your body as you're working. And as you get into the center, you can't see this here. I freaking love this, man. But as you get into the center, that's your para-Brahman, right? That's where para-Brahman is. Yeah. Anyway, I didn't teach this, but what I realized is that for years, like I was doing a sort of Nidra yoga style meditation. And what Nidra yoga is it's allowing your consciousness to move into different parts of your body. And as I was studying Tantra, I realized, wait a minute, the way I'm meditating is a lot like Nyasa. And what's funny is I actually evoke like deities at various places without actually knowing that I was doing some kind of sort of phony kind of Nyasa, right? Yeah. So I've had some big experiences, and so I did transmissions, and a few people felt the transmissions. So I mean, because you don't know, you feel like I don't want to be pretentious and then start acting like oh, I'm my guru or something. So part of it is trying to find like your comfort zone. Like, what is my comfort zone, right? And like also like if you're doing a transmission, how is that? Like some people talk and do. Some people talk and they do. Some people talk and they'll do like mantras and stuff. Other people will just sit silently. Like Krister will just sit there and do nothing. Then the what's her Imogen, who's also does rasa, she does this sort of pushing out, and I kind of like that pushing out thing she does. It just gets into the mind. Now, the way things have worked out for me is like I've worked with a lot of plants, so like a lot of the vibe I've got is quite shamanic. So like, and I'm also extremely visual. So once the energy starts flowing, it's like it just goes by itself. I'm just watching it, and it's like, okay, oh. And so a lot of times what I'm doing is I'll be like moving my hands around, and I'll be like looking around like different spaces, and and pulling energy and moving energy around, kind of a thing. But that's sort of, but it's like that's more of a sort of energy. It's a kundalini. It's a sort of kundalini transmission. But the thing is is like I was saying to you, Matthias, like the key to this is you have to get into a zone where you feel like pure energy. You've got to be really into it. Like if you're thinking, oh, I don't know if this is right, then you're not doing anything, right? So you got to get into a space where it feels where it feels actualized and beautiful and energetic and divine, right? You can do non-divine stuff too, but you don't want to be screwing around with that, right? So you want to be like really doing this in a way which is like yeah, which is like a beautiful transmission, right? Um yeah, it's funny. The Kundalini just kicked on right now. I'm just feeling it now in the back of my spine right now, just because I'm starting to talk about it. Like whenever you talk about it, it starts going on, you know? And so you right, and so you can start pushing it. But I think probably for me, I don't know, like so like there's some people, for example, they do transmissions. All they do is they look at you, like, right? They smile at you, right? Then, for example, Julian, my shaman, he's pretty powerful, Julian, man, but he does it with music. Like when he plays music, I mean, he awoke my Kundalini in a ceremony and he started singing and it just boom, it just opened me up. And like, yeah, there's audio on the here, let me I think I made it public. Well, I didn't make it public. I think I did it like I made it unlisted because somebody wanted to hear it. So in this audio, if I can find it, it's actually you can hear me going through like one of my first Kundalini experiences. I'll just see if I can post it. If it is, what the hell is it called? It's called Sanango, I think. But back then I didn't know how to pronounce it. I was calling it Sananga or Saningo. Like, I meant well. Where's the search thing? Sanango. Is it Sanango or it's Sanango, right? That's where it's, no. I'm gonna have to search for it here. I want to post it because I mean it was sort of because I'm just trying to demonstrate this idea that things can be done with song. And I guess it's not like in the context of an ayahuasca ceremony, it's not hard to believe that might happen during a song because it's kind of an Icaros. It was an Icaros, right? So it's not that unusual that would happen actually. But but you don't often hear it. And what was interesting was a small ceremony. There was like me and like 5 girls and Julian and like we don't I used to have the whole thing recorded, but I lost it during a big computer crash. And but I've got this one section of it recorded because I put it into this video, which I think was quite lucky. The problem is I've got like 500 videos here, I think. So let me just I'm sorry this is a bit boring, but hopefully it will. Maybe I can play this. I'm grabbing audio now, so I'm not sure if you'll be able to hear it. I'm gonna have to do this whole thing over on the other phone again. Well, I'll just post the link. If it doesn't work, I'll just post the link. Is that no? Oh, yeah, Matthias. I was also talking to Matthias about this initiation experience I had, where I went to Sai Baba's temple. This was after I did my first full Kundalini sweep, like up through the crown chakra. So I'm just gonna make that unlisted too. If you want to listen to it, members, I'll make that unlisted. Done and save. Okay. Now I was a bit I was a little bit heavier back in these days, but whatever. There you go. Here's that first video is the initiation. So this is where I talk about the experience where I was working with energy and it took over my body and I got blasted out my third eye as the Kundalini came up. My pipe. Did I lose a pipe? Can't remember. I do have a pipe here, but So I guess maybe I did. Let me just try and find the other one. Dude, it's funny looking at some of these old videos because it's like, dude, until that initiation, like I was totally like confused by everything, man. Like it was so over the top. Like, what the fuck is going on, dude? It was crazy. But after the initiation, it was like, oh, all of a sudden I was able to balance the energy and I was able to deal with it. I could, and like even if there was demonic energies, it was like easy to get rid of it. So it was, thank God for the initiation. That was really important. Still looking. I'm getting close though. This is like back at, how can I have 500 videos here? This is crazy. I don't feel like I've got 500 videos here. This is not making exciting chat, I'm afraid, but it's so important. I'm getting close though. Hold on, next page. Sananga. I get so much stuff in Sananga. Where's Sanango? Subconscious. Sanango, I found it. Okay, here we go. And it's unlisted already. Okay. So I talk a lot in this video about like the oh yeah, I never got that back. No. No, I mean, listen, the thing with Julian is he won't even admit that he initiated me. He kind of does, but he wants, like I knew him for 2 years, right? And like he let me go through a really big dark night of the soul, and thinking I was going crazy and everything, um, so yeah. But hey, tell me if you can hear this, and if it's good quality. I doubt it'll be good quality. I'm just gonna play this here and see if it works. What's it called? It's called. Can you hear that? Like it's on the same computer, so you might not be able to hear it. And I'll just post the video. Like the video is probably interesting enough, but the actual the video actually starts. I'll copy at the current time. It starts at about 14 minutes in. Yeah, anyway, yeah, he doesn't do them online. I mean, it's like he probably doesn't even admit. Yeah, there's the video. That's at the time. So if you listen to it there, you're going to start hearing. Now he just called me up into ceremony. Like he called me into the center of the group, and then he's like, "Hey, Gringo, come up here, man." And we'd been like doing Sanango, like Sharik Sanango all day, and we'd done like 4 cups of ayahuasca each. And yeah, dude. So it's interesting. So what happened in this video, that last link I posted, what happens here is he's singing into my root or into my Svadhisthana, right? So he's singing the Svadhisthana, and all of a sudden the room goes completely cold. It was like one of those classic spiritual things, like everything it becomes freezing. You can start seeing your breath in the room instantly, boom. And like it was kind of scary, but then all of a sudden I start feeling this tickling, like down in my root chakra, and he's singing, and dude, and like there was a moment there where I was like, there was a moment where you could choose fear or you could choose like life, and so I just went with the life, and then all of a sudden I start laughing, and like the girls are laughing. It just became really infectious. It was outrageous. So if you listen to the audio, I'm talking like this. I'm talking with that high voice because it's like it was so ecstatic, and I'd never really experienced that. I'd had big experiences like in ceremonies before, but like there was it was crazy, dude. And that was a big experience, but that pales to like the initiation experience. That's like fucking whatever compared to what happened. Whatever, dude. Right? And even now, even initiation is like whatever now, dude. I mean, I've done so many crazy. Like if you're looking for mystical experiences, I mean, like apparently mystical experiences are also a hindrance, right? So you want to get past that too. But yeah, interesting. Anyway, yeah, I guess I'm just trying to respond to Matthias here. So he won't do them online. He won't even admit that he does them. So it's something that Julian and me are really good friends. Like he was really ill 2 months ago, and he called me up to do a transmission to try and help him, And so, and he calls me a shaman, right? So I'm like, dude, don't be calling me a shaman, brother, but that's what he says, And there's a lot of like shamanic energy, right? So something happened. And so I think that's the thing is like what happens is like if you're Kundalini activated, you'll have this energy flow, but it's like you don't understand it, and you're getting like visions, and it's confusing and stuff, right? And then there are other times like but like I think also like reading magical books, they're always talking about using energy, and it feels like it's just imagination. But the moment you're initiated, it all just becomes real. Like everything just becomes real. It's just like you can feel this. Now, a good way of doing this too is there's some really good Reiki masters who can initiate you. So you have to find. I mean, this might be a good one for you, Matthias. Is look for a good Reiki master, right? So, like, if you find an authentic Reiki master that can initiate you, you have to do like their 3-step. It's like a course. Like you become a Reiki master yourself, but you do initiations, and if they're authentic, it will change how you operate. It will change everything. It will initiate you into energy. I mean, that's literally what Reiki is, So that's a good way of doing it. And then you can redirect it how you wish. Like, so, Julian did this like shamanic initiation, right? And I'm like really focusing on meditation, right? So yeah, if you find it good, ideas. I mean, maybe you don't need it, but I mean, but I think if you got Kundalini syndrome, a lot of times that can help. Also, if you're struggling with Kundalini syndrome, talk to what's her face? I interviewed her. She's a really good writer, but she's written a bunch of books on Kundalini syndrome, and she's on my main page here. I've forgotten her name. Tara Springett, but she does train in the gym. Okay, cool. But she does guidance for people with Kundalini syndrome, and I found her books really helpful. She's got a really good book. She's got a really good book on Kundalini syndrome, which explains a bunch of meditations. Which there's a lot of like deity practices, and I found it really useful. And again, because everything I look at becomes real now, it's Tara Springett. She's actually been on the Guru Viking podcast quite a lot lately on YouTube, and I interviewed her too on my channel. But and she's got a bunch of books which are really useful, and she's got one particularly on Kundalini syndrome. What is it? It's on Tara Springett Kundalini. Let me see books. Oh, it's called. Is that the one? She's got a bunch of books now. Healing Kundalini symptoms, proven techniques that really work. So that's a good one. And she's focused on Tibetan Buddhism, and she's a psychologist too, I guess. So if you're having trouble with energy, that's a really good one to go with. And it's practical, and the practices are awesome. Really, really good. And like I was saying to you, I think it's really worthwhile. Like I was saying, like with me working on Om Mani Padme Hum became like I can't even tell you how that's improved my life. It's so amazing. Om Mani Padme Hum is so amazing. But what's really stunning is when I started working with Tomer with the Sri Vidya group, what I found was the mantras they were giving they're activated. So a lot of times you find a mantra on the internet like Om Namah Shivaya, you'll say it 1,000 times and not feel anything. Now, eventually you might feel something, but the ones from from Tomer, like at first you're kind of like, is there something here? And then all of a sudden it just emerges, and that's what happened. Like, so I was working on the Durga mantra, which I've forgotten for some reason, but like I can't say it now anyway because they have like a lifespan. But that was when the Virgin Mary evoked in the bedroom, and so that's why I'm feeling really comfortable about talking about and working with the Virgin Mary, because it was part of like it was part of a tantric evocation, you know. Because I never even thought of the Virgin Mary before. Are you kidding me? Right? But it was actually really powerful, you guys. And also quite educational, you know, because then if that opens up the whole of Christianity, you know, and and also just the whole idea. This is one of the things, like I was working, as you know, with Hilmar too, my friend Hilmar, who's he kind of teaches Kundalini stuff too, and like Hilmar had some really good yeah, but Matthias, you know, this whole thing about having Kundalini trapped in your crown. Yeah. I think a good thing to do is find a devotional practice, right? And also maybe read Gopi Krishna. Gopi Krishna had he's pretty famous because he meditated on the crown chakra for many years, and then one day blew Kundalini out of his head, but he went it went badly, and he thought he was going crazy for a couple of years, and then slowly he learned how to guide the Kundalini into the correct place, right? So that might be a useful resource. He wrote a lot of books, so you'll have to do a bit of research to see which one works for you, right? But I think meanwhile is, like I was saying to you like last night, is the thing is that the people tend to be kind of like methodical and like numerical about how to move Kundalini. And what I'm saying is most of the real Kundalini Tantra people from India say the way to evoke Kundalini is to pray in the chakras. Just pray sincerely, right? And so pray, and you know, people don't want to do it, right? Because they just want, because we're still identified with our ego, and it's like, no, I'm not going to pray. I don't really feel anything about God. Yeah, it's all bullshit. Meanwhile, you get fucking Kundalini stored up, and what might need to happen is you might need to allow your ego to bow before divinity, and it can be weird doing it, right? When I worked with Chris Mitchell, I did the 28-day Shaktipat, but there was one day I go out for these long walks, and I was walking along the canal one day, and the energy forced me down to my knees and made me bow down, right? And I'm like, wow, okay. And the funny thing about it was, like, there was a sense of embarrassment because I'm bowing down, but it was so ecstatic. And so what happened is when I tried to get up, it just felt, it was like this, it was just this golden thread of delight in my back. And so I went back down because it felt so fucking amazing, right? And so there was this connection with divinity. And it was like it was the surrender to God, you know? And so try being devotional in some way. And if you're not comfortable like bowing or praying, do something simple. Like I found it really useful. Like for a while there, I should still be doing this. Like every time I was downtown, I'd buy like a big bunch of flowers once a week, you know, and I put the flowers on my desk, and that was a sadhana, simple sadhana. And it was just there as an honor to God, right? And so I'm walking around and you see the flowers, you're like, it's just a symbolic message. You're just saying, boom. And so that's a good way of doing it too, is like doing a sadhana, some kind of like spiritual practice where you intentionally connect and you intentionally surrender, even if it's in a symbolic way, like just buying flowers and taking care of them, right? You cultivate the flowers as a way of cultivating this connection, right? And that's another good way of working too with energy, is rather than trying to like, okay, I'm going to focus on this, I'm going to move this crowd energy. Work metaphorically, right? Work with a metaphor. Like, you know, like a rose is kind of like a crown chakra, right? So I mean, maybe work with that, like metaphorically, right? There's a whole bunch of things you might think about, but you have to allow your own creativity to flow, right? These are just my ideas, but like For you, it has to be authentic, because Kundalini doesn't like inauthenticity, right? Everything's got to be sincere, because it's got to be absolute truth. Is what it's going to be, right? Absolute truth. Kind of off track here. I was trying to talk about dukkha and the hindrances, but whatever. The big thing is, like, try watching it's not even your thoughts, it's watching the energy flows. Watch the energy flows as they come into your mind, like during the day, right? And try and identify them as what they are. They're structural. Don't identify with them. And just doing that pushes you towards non-duality, because you're sort of deconstructing, you're dissolving them by recognizing what they are. Because if you see the energy and you connect with the energy, you're in the stream of the contents, right? Which has its value too, right? And it'll happen, right? Because it is Shakti. There's nothing embarrassing about getting swept up with the contents. It's Shakti, right? It's divine energy. Like, the one thing I don't like about the monks is they talk about this stuff like it's just bad. You must know. Don't go there. It's the worst thing, right? And it's because, like, they're kind of focused on Shiva. They don't talk about Shiva, but they're focused on Nibbana, right? Which is it's like this no thought state, right? Which is cool. But one way of achieving that too is identification and transformation too. So if you do see like a flood of sexual thoughts, you can transform them, right? You can transform them by, you can, like I was saying, you can move to the womb, right? The breasts of the Virgin Mary. And so there's a way of working with things in a way which it's not even trying to purify them. It's just trying to see them in the wider context of what it really is. And it works on a metaphorical level. It works on an energetic level. And ultimately what happens is got the effect of, like, as you're walking through life during the day, you just feel this beautiful, soft, clean aura around you. It just feels good to be clean, because, like, there's so many thoughts which can go through your mind, right? Even if you're like on a news channel. Like, I was on CNN, unfortunately, the other day, and I'm scrolling through CNN just so I can like criticize it, like those idiots or whatever, right? That already is a bad vibe. And then as you're scrolling, they've always got something about this girl was in her bikini, and you're going to click on it. And then a little further down, there's always a thing about the serial killer who trapped the girls. And everything's there as a hook to pull you away and force you into the contents, right? That's what's happening. So what you have to do in that case is better to close the sign stores, right? You can certainly go and look at it, but, like, it's funny if you go and look. Like, I don't like to watch horror films or read any stories like that, because I can feel the impurity of it. I can just feel it. It's disgusting. I don't want to be near that stuff. Don't want to be near it. And then when you have this ability of perceiving truth, and there's a bunch of different types of truth. There's the truth of the structure of consciousness, and that in itself is perfection. But then there's also the truth of just truth itself. So, like in a news story, like they always lie about everything. But then when you actually see real truth, that's cleanliness, right? And then there's or purity, right? So there's all these ways. There's different aspects of this. Which, why would you not want to be around that, right? And so, like, doing a prayer, like, even if you don't believe in Jesus, but if you pray to Jesus, it's certainly a much higher state of consciousness than reading a news website, right? It's pushing you towards a higher aspiration, right? It's a higher aspiration. And even the energetic movement towards a higher aspiration purifies the channels of your consciousness, right? It's a beautiful process. Now, at first, you're going to come across these hindrances, which are like, no, don't go in that direction. Don't. Why would you bother? That's all bullshit. Jesus didn't exist, I kicked somebody off the YouTube channel the other day because I posted something about Jesus, and they were like, oh, It's a stupid guy on a stick. It was Jesus and the crucifix. And you know what? I just kicked him off the channel. I don't want to be around people like that. I don't want to be around with anybody who thinks he's this fucking smart ass with that kind of attitude, you know, which is bad. You know, I should have been more open about it, but just in the moment, I was like, fuck off, man. Right? It's like the presence. Here's the funny thing is the presence of God is all around us. It's everywhere. It's in every molecule. It's everywhere. We're just pretending. The only reason you think it's not here is because there's a layer of thought structures which are telling you it's not there. It's literally here right now. I can feel it, right? And it's not like, oh, God's here. No, it's the materiality, it's the actuality, it's the energetic structure, it's the visualization, it's everything. And we're just blind to it. It's kind of like if I'm looking through this bottle, it's like the world is blue, but I didn't know it was a bottle, right? Or this other one, you know, it's like the fish in a. If you talk to a fish and tell it's in the ocean, it's like, what? It doesn't realize it's in the ocean. It's like a lack of perspective. It's the same thing with divinity. It's right here, right now. You're just in complete denial about it, right? It's not even denial. It's like we don't even have the perception. Our perception of consciousness is so pathetic that we can't even perceive ourselves, let alone God, right? So, yeah, like Mikhail's saying here, love, devotion, surrender. Those are just concepts. But what happens is the more we align with like truthful ideas, then what happens is it starts to release the resin and the sediment of untruth, right? Our whole world's going crazy, right? I mean, there's a whole thing with like everybody wants to become a woman and all this other stuff. And these are all thought forms, but people are so engaged with them, right? That they become real, and they're really dangerous. And they're not dangerous. They're dangerous because they're not true. And they're dangerous because they're not correctly discerned, right? Because they're literally made out of the materiality of the hindrances, right? Literally. Because they're literally made of astral material, because it's not based in reality, it's based on imaginary ideas. And so what happens is those imaginative ideas have been crystallized into extremely solid structures. It's really dangerous, because every time you materialize something in the astral plane, there's a lot of entity activity around that kind of stuff, you know? And I can tell you that stuff is infested with entities, right? And it's not just that. I mean, there's a whole bunch of this stuff. It's completely, yeah. Yeah. Really, it's funny. Like, people think AI is going to change the world, man, but just focusing on the purification of consciousness, and that doesn't mean you can't have sex or anything else. It means you investigate what it really means, right? What it really means, you know, and allowing light, not just in a ayahuasca trip, not just in meditation, but in life, in waking consciousness. What does it mean to allow light into your actions? Like, I don't kill insects anymore. I can't do it. And one of the things is, every time I look at them, I start seeing the intricate structure of their architecture. I'm like, they're divinely created, and I'm here with a fucking fly swatter, right? And so what happens is the more you allow this good, like the vibration of goodness, and that's not, you know, in the modern world, it's not sexy, you know, everybody wants to be edgy and fetishy, right? But if you allow the vibration of goodness, it's so much more satisfying, right? It's so much more beautiful and truthful, and more sexy. The reason the other stuff seems sexy, it's lack of its what's the word? It's unskillful perception. It's unskillful perception of what's actually happening. I think I'm done. Really nice talking with you guys. Thanks for coming and listening to me fucking go off the handle. That's kind of all I want to do is because I'll tell you one thing. You were like Matthias, you were saying, do I do transmissions? One of the things that I've discovered is that as I'm working with people is that I always want to somehow in the discussion or somehow evoke divinity into the discussion in any way that I can weave this in, right? And it surprises people because people don't talk about this stuff, right? And I never talked about it. And so I'm like, it's kind of it's funny, but it's almost like being an agent for divinity in this world and to promulgate the delivery of divine love through words. Much love, you guys. Take care.